The rifle shot cracked across Fort Bragg's known distance range complex at 6:30 a.m., splitting the cold March morning like breaking glass. Fog hung low over the firing positions, turning the world into shades of gray and muted green. The temperature held at 38 degrees, cold enough that every breath formed small clouds in the air. The smell of gun oil mixed with brass casings and strong coffee drifted across the range where 42 soldiers stood in formation, their boots crunching on gravel as they shifted weight and waited. "Step aside, rookie." Colonel Hugo Steele's voice cut through the morning air with the force of a blade. Every syllable carried the weight of 30 years in uniform, 3 decades of command that had shaped his worldview into something rigid and uncompromising. "This is for real soldiers." Corporal Raven Cross stood at the firing line, her hands wrapped around an M4 carbine that looked almost too large for her small frame. She was 5 feet 3 inches tall, 118 pounds, and the baggy Army combat uniform hung on her like borrowed clothes. Her dark hair was pulled back tight in a regulation bun, revealing a face that could have belonged to someone barely out of high school. She had been assigned to Alpha Company exactly 1 week ago, transferred in from some administrative position that nobody had bothered to ask about. 7 days, and already she was causing problems by requesting to participate in the quarterly qualification test that would determine deployment readiness. "Did you hear me, Corporal?" Hugo stepped closer, his 6-foot frame towering over her. His voice dropped to something colder than the morning air. "Move! You're wasting our time." Laughter rippled through the assembled soldiers. It started with the squad leaders and spread backward through the ranks like a contagion of contempt. Sergeant First Class Cyrus Thorne, standing at 6 feet 4 inches and weighing nearly 240 pounds, made no effort to hide his smirk. His massive arms crossed over his chest as he turned to the man beside him. "Tiny shouldn't even be here, sir. This is combat qualification, not some participation trophy exercise." More laughter. Someone in the back made a comment too quiet to hear clearly, but the tone carried. Lieutenant Jasper Quinn stepped forward from his position near the observation tower, his confident swagger drawing eyes. At 32 years old, he was Alpha Company's executive officer and the unofficial pride of the battalion. Former college football star, natural leader, and the man who had held the unit's marksmanship record for the past 8 years. 42 hits out of 50 targets in 9 minutes and 22 seconds. Nobody had come close to touching it, and the way Jasper carried himself made it clear he expected that record to stand for another 8 years at least. "She can't handle the M4 recoil, Colonel," Jasper said, loud enough for everyone to hear. His tone carried just enough concern to sound professional, but his eyes showed pure dismissal. "Look at her stance. That's not combat-ready positioning. That's someone who's going to hurt herself and waste ammunition." Raven slowly stepped away from the firing line, her head lowered, shoulders curved inward in what looked like defeat or shame. She didn't speak, didn't argue, didn't meet anyone's eyes. The rifle hung in her hands at a careful angle, muzzle pointed safely downrange even as she retreated. Around her, soldiers shook their heads. Some looked disappointed, others looked satisfied, as if she had simply confirmed what they already knew. Specialist Levi Cole stood near the rear of the formation, his thin frame making him nearly invisible among the larger men. At 22, he was young enough to still believe in fairness and old enough to recognize injustice when he saw it. His jaw clenched as he watched Raven walk away, but he said nothing. Speaking up would only make him the next target, and he had learned that lesson the hard way during his first 6 months in the unit. Master Sergeant Isaac Vale stood beside the observation tower, motionless as stone. At 44, he had spent 20 years in service, earned his Ranger tab the hard way, and developed an instinct for reading soldiers that rarely failed him. His eyes tracked Raven's movement with focused intensity. There was something about the way she held the weapon, even in retreat, something about her posture that didn't quite match the vulnerability she projected. The grip was too sure, the muzzle awareness too automatic. Those were reflexes that came from extensive training, not from administrative duty. But Isaac said nothing, not yet. He had learned when to speak and when to watch, and right now, the moment called for observation. "All right, listen up," Hugo's voice snapped back to command mode. "We're already behind schedule because of this distraction. Quinn, you're up first. Show everyone how this is actually done." Jasper moved to the firing line with the ease of someone who had done this hundreds of times. He checked his weapon with practiced efficiency, loaded the magazine, and settled into position. When the range safety officer called the command to commence firing, Jasper's shots came in controlled, measured bursts. Target after target fell as he worked his way through the course. The crowd watched with appreciation, some with envy. This was what excellence looked like in their world. This was the standard. Raven had moved to the equipment shed, a small concrete building that provided shelter from the wind and served as storage for ammunition and tactical gear. She leaned against the exterior wall, still holding her rifle in textbook safety position. Her breathing came steady and measured, not like someone who was upset or embarrassed, just calm, waiting. Isaac continued to watch her from his position. The way she stood against that wall triggered something in his memory. That wasn't the posture of someone defeated. That was the stance of someone conserving energy, staying ready, maintaining situational awareness while appearing to do nothing at all. He had seen that exact positioning before, years ago, during joint operations with specialized units. Rangers did it, Special Forces did it, SEALs did it, but that made no sense. Raven Cross was a corporal who had transferred in from some rear echelon position. Her paperwork said nothing about advanced training, nothing about deployment history, nothing that would explain why she moved, like someone who had spent significant time downrange. Jasper completed his qualification run in solid time. 42 targets hit, time of 9 minutes and 22 seconds. Exactly matching his own record because he had done this so many times that the numbers were essentially automatic. The crowd applauded. Hugo nodded approval. Jasper returned to formation with the satisfied air of someone who had just proved an obvious point. That, Hugo announced to the assembled company, is how real soldiers perform. Not everyone belongs here. Some people need to accept their limitations and find roles that better suit their capabilities. The words landed with deliberate weight. Everyone knew who he meant. Several soldiers glanced toward the equipment shed where Raven still stood. Staff Sergeant Kelvin Drake, the range's non-commissioned officer in charge, made a show of checking his watch and shaking his head, as if her mere presence had somehow stolen valuable training time from more deserving personnel. Before we continue with what happens next, I need to ask you something important. Have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever been dismissed because of how you look, where you come from, or what people assume about you? This story is about more than just one woman proving herself. It's about respect, hidden strength, and the cost of judgment. If this resonates with you, hit that subscribe button right now. You don't want to miss what's about to unfold. Trust me, the next 5 minutes will change everything you think you know about this rookie soldier. The morning continued. Other soldiers took their turns at qualification. Some passed easily, others struggled. A few failed entirely. Through it all, Raven remained at the equipment shed, occasionally shifting position but never leaving her post. She appeared to be waiting for something, though what remained unclear. Around the 10-minute mark, during a break between firing rotations, she approached Hugo with careful, measured steps. Her boots made soft sounds on the gravel. She stopped at precisely the appropriate distance for addressing a superior officer and came to attention. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but clear. "Sir, I request permission to attempt the qualification test." Hugo turned slowly, his expression suggesting he had just been asked the most ridiculous question of his military career. "Excuse me? Permission to attempt the qualification test, sir?" "Absolutely not." Hugo's response came without hesitation. "I've already explained that this exercise is for soldiers who are deployment ready. You're not qualified for this level of training. With respect, sir, my orders assign me to Alpha Company as a rifleman. The qualification test is required for all personnel in that role." Several soldiers stopped their conversations to watch this exchange. The audacity of a brand new corporal arguing with a battalion commander drew attention like a traffic accident. Captain Edwin North, the S3 operations officer, moved closer with interest. At 40, Edwin had developed a talent for office politics that served him better than his moderate combat experience. He enjoyed moments like this, where someone else made themselves look foolish. "Your orders," Hugo said slowly, "can be modified based on demonstrated capability. And what you've demonstrated so far is a complete lack of readiness for infantry operations." "Dismissed, Corporal." Isaac chose that moment to intervene. He stepped forward from the observation tower, his presence commanding immediate respect. "Sir, if I may." Hugo glanced at him with mild irritation. "What is it, First Sergeant?" "Everyone deserves one chance, sir. That's the Army way. We don't determine capability without assessment. Isaac kept his tone professional, but his words carried subtle challenge. If Corporal Cross fails the qualification, then we'll have objective data to support a transfer decision. But if we don't let her try, we're making assumptions instead of evaluations. The logic was sound enough that refusing would make Hugo look unreasonable. He considered for a long moment, weighing his options, clearly unhappy about being maneuvered into this position. Finally, he nodded once, sharply. "Fine, one attempt." He pointed at Raven with rigid authority. "But understand this, Corporal. When you fail this qualification, you will be transferred to logistics immediately. No arguments, no appeals. You'll accept the assignment that better matches your actual capabilities. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear, sir." "Then get your equipment and stop wasting everyone's time." Raven moved toward the armory with the same careful, economical movements she had displayed all morning. As she walked, Specialist Ryan Fisher pulled out his phone and started recording. "This is going to be good," he muttered to the soldier beside him. $50 says she doesn't make it past the 2-minute mark." Corporal Ethan Ward, standing nearby, laughed and nodded. "I'll take that bet. I say she quits before even finishing the first magazine. Probably starts crying when the recoil hurts her shoulder." The betting spread quickly through the ranks. Soldiers wagered on how badly she would fail, how quickly she would quit, whether she would actually cry or just look embarrassed. The atmosphere shifted from dismissive to almost festive, as if they were all about to witness entertainment rather than a professional evaluation. Raven reached the armory window where Chief Warrant Officer Otis Grant managed the weapons and equipment. At 52, Otis had forgotten more about firearms than most soldiers would ever learn. He had been an armorer for 3 decades, had worked on everything from pistols to heavy machine guns, and had developed an eye for how people handled weapons that bordered on instinctive. When Raven picked up the M4 carbine from the counter, Otis noticed something immediately. The way her hand wrapped around the grip showed muscle memory that went beyond basic training. Her fingers found the controls without looking. The angle of the weapon as she checked the chamber was exactly right, economical and efficient. She handled the rifle like an extension of her own body, not like an unfamiliar tool. Interesting. Otis said nothing, but his eyes narrowed slightly as he watched her walk away. Raven collected magazines and tactical vest, loaded her gear with methodical precision, and moved to the firing line. The crowd had grown larger now. Word had spread that the new corporal was actually going to attempt qualification, despite the colonel's objections. Soldiers from other companies had wandered over to watch. Some came out of genuine curiosity. Others came hoping to see a spectacular failure they could discuss later. Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Shaw arrived at the observation tower, standing beside Hugo with quiet authority. At 48, Daniel had spent enough time in combat zones to recognize something real when he saw it. He had also served as a liaison officer with SEAL Team 3 back in 2017, which gave him perspective that most Army officers lacked. He watched Raven's preparation with interest, but said nothing. Sergeant Amber Reed stood at the edge of the crowd, arms crossed, expression conflicted. As one of only 3 women in Alpha Company, she understood exactly what Raven was facing. But Amber had learned to survive by staying quiet, by not making waves, by accepting the limitations that others placed on her and working within them. Watching another woman push against those boundaries made her uncomfortable, not because she disagreed, but because she knew what failure would mean. It would make things harder for all of them. Private First Class Oliver Kent stood near Jasper, his young face showing uncertainty. At 20, Oliver was fresh from basic training and still figuring out how military culture actually worked beyond what the manuals said. He had idolized Jasper since arriving, saw him as the model of what a soldier should be, but something about this situation felt wrong in ways Oliver couldn't quite articulate. The mockery seemed excessive. The predetermined judgment seemed unfair. He kept these thoughts to himself. Hugo checked his watch with obvious impatience. "You have 15 minutes, Corporal. Clock starts the moment you fire your first round. That's more than enough time for someone who is actually qualified." Raven moved to the firing position. She loaded her first magazine with smooth efficiency, inserted it into the weapon, pulled the charging handle, and chambered a round. Her stance settled into something that looked almost relaxed, weight distributed in a way that would manage recoil naturally. Her breathing slowed and steadied. Kelvin, acting as range safety officer, stepped beside her with barely concealed hostility. "Rules are simple. 50 targets at various ranges from 100 to 300 meters. Pop-up timing. You engage as they appear. Any questions? No, Sergeant. Then whenever you're ready to embarrass yourself. The first target appeared at 200 meters. Raven's weapon came up in one smooth motion and fired. The target dropped immediately. Bullseye. The crowd noise dimmed slightly. Lucky shot, probably. Everyone gets lucky once. Second target, 150 meters. She fired. Target dropped. Another center mass hit. Third target, 250 meters. Fire, drop, perfect grouping. The crowd went quiet. 3 perfect shots wasn't luck anymore. That was skill. Isaac's eyes never left her. The way she moved between targets showed training that went far beyond basic qualification. Her transitions were too smooth, her target acquisition too fast, her breathing control too precise. This wasn't someone who barely knew how to shoot. This was someone who had spent hundreds, maybe thousands of hours on ranges far more demanding than this one. Raven continued firing. Target after target dropped with mechanical precision. Her grouping stayed tight even as the ranges varied. When she had to adjust for wind, she did so with calculations that looked automatic. 15 targets down, all hits, all center mass, all perfect. Jasper's confident expression had vanished, his arms uncrossed. He leaned forward slightly, watching with intensity that bordered on disbelief. This wasn't possible. New corporals didn't shoot like this. Administrative personnel didn't shoot like this. She had to be getting lucky with the target timing or something. There had to be an explanation that didn't involve her actually being this good. 20 targets down, 20 hits. The only sound on the range was her weapon firing and brass casings hitting concrete. Cyrus had stopped smiling. His massive frame had gone rigid, jaw clenched as he watched something he couldn't process. This couldn't be real. This tiny woman who looked like she might blow away in a strong wind was making shots that would be impressive for a seasoned infantryman. It violated everything he believed about physical requirements for combat roles. 25 targets, 25 hits. Perfect score so far, and the time was under 5 minutes. The tactical movement phase began next. Raven set her weapon on safe, slung it across her body, and dropped into a low crawl position. The course required moving under barbed wire for 30 meters while maintaining weapon control and then engaging targets from prone position. Most soldiers struggled with this section because it combined physical endurance with technical skill, all while eating dirt and fighting equipment that wanted to snag on every obstacle. Raven moved under the wire like water flowing downhill. Her body stayed low, her movement efficient, her weapon positioned perfectly to avoid catching on obstructions. The crawl was smooth, controlled, showing none of the awkward struggling that typically characterized this portion of qualification. When she reached the firing position, she transitioned to shooting stance in one fluid motion and engaged the next series of targets without apparent pause to recover from the physical exertion. Otis leaned toward Isaac and spoke quietly. "That's advanced school movement, First Sergeant. That's not something you learn in basic infantry training. Where did she train?" Isaac had no answer. He was asking himself the same question. The stress fire phase started immediately after tactical movement. This section tested ability to engage multiple targets under time pressure, simulating the chaos of actual combat. Pop-up targets appeared at irregular intervals, staying visible for only a few seconds before dropping. Soldiers had to acquire, aim, and fire in a compressed time frame that punished hesitation. Raven engaged 6 targets in 8 seconds, all hits, all center mass. Her transitions between targets were so fast they looked almost impossible. The crowd had gone from quiet to absolutely silent, watching something that didn't fit their understanding of reality. Edwin pulled out his tablet, his fingers moving quickly across the screen as he accessed personnel files. Something was wrong here. Something fundamental didn't match. He needed to see Raven's full transfer orders, her training history, her complete record. Nobody shot like this without extensive background documentation. Kelvin stepped forward, his professional demeanor cracking. "Call your shots," he demanded, his voice harder than necessary. "Let's see if you even know what you're doing, or if this is just blind luck." Raven paused, lowered her weapon slightly, and turned her head just enough to make eye contact. When she spoke, her voice carried a calm that bordered on eerie. "Center mass, 2 inches left of vertical, 3 o'clock position from point of aim. Adjusted for 7-mile-per-hour crosswind from northwest. Target range approximately 220 meters based on size and sight picture." The terminology was exact. The language was what professional shooters used. More than that, It was what specialized military shooters used. Kelvin's face flushed red. He had tried to embarrass her and instead revealed that she knew more about shooting than half the soldiers watching. "Continue the exercise," he muttered, stepping back. Raven returned to firing position and continued the qualification. 30 targets down, 30 hits. The scoreboard, visible to everyone in the observation area, showed nothing but perfect marks. Soldiers who had been laughing earlier now watched in stunned silence. This wasn't supposed to be possible. Records didn't fall. New corporals didn't outshoot veteran marksmen. Reality didn't work this way. The tension is building, isn't it? But here's what you need to understand. Every breadcrumb we've seen so far is leading somewhere massive. If you're invested in finding out who Raven really is, do me a favor. Leave a comment below telling me what you think her background might be. Former military? Special operations? Something else entirely? Drop your theories now, and make sure you're subscribed, because the reveal is coming faster than you think. The weapon malfunction happened at 37 targets. Raven pulled the trigger and nothing happened. The magazine had failed to feed properly, causing a jam that would require immediate action to clear. For most soldiers, this represented a crisis moment that could derail their entire qualification. Under stress, in front of an audience, with a jammed weapon and time running out, many would panic or fumble. Raven's response was immediate and automatic. She performed what shooters called immediate action. Tap the magazine, rack the charging handle, attempt to fire. When that didn't work, she transitioned to remedial action. Her hands moved with practiced speed, dropping the magazine, clearing the chamber, inspecting for obstruction, reloading, and returning to firing position. The entire process took less than 10 seconds, but it was the way she did it that made Otis's eyes go wide. That wasn't just fast. That was expert-level weapon manipulation. That was the kind of speed that came from drilling the movement thousands of times until it became as automatic as breathing. He had seen that level of proficiency exactly twice in his career, both times from soldiers who had attended the most elite training programs the military offered. "First Sergeant," Otis said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper, "that clearing drill, that's SEAL team technique. That's exactly how they teach it at advanced weapons courses." Isaac said nothing, but his jaw tightened. He was starting to piece together a picture that didn't make sense yet, but the edges were becoming visible. Whoever Raven Cross really was, she wasn't what her paperwork claimed. Raven completed the final 13 targets without hesitation. 43, 44, 45. Each one dropped with precision that looked mechanical. The time on the clock continued ticking down, but she was so far ahead of pace that time was irrelevant. 46, 47, 2 targets remaining. Jasper had gone pale. His record was 42 targets in 9 minutes, 22 seconds. She was already past his number with time to spare. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, knuckles white with pressure. This couldn't be happening. 8 years. 8 years he had held that record. 8 years of being the undisputed best marksman in the battalion. And now this nobody, this administrative transfer who had been here for 1 week, was about to shatter it. The final phase required running 200 meters while wearing full combat load, 40 pounds of gear including tactical vest, helmet, ammunition, and weapon, then engaging targets immediately upon reaching the shooting position. Most soldiers arrived at the end of that sprint breathing hard, heart pounding, hands shaking from exertion. Shooting accurately from that state was the entire point of the test. Combat didn't wait for you to catch your breath. Hugo checked the timer on his watch, his expression impossible to read. 3 minutes, 12 seconds for the sprint. That was faster than Jasper's time of 3 minutes, 28 seconds. Fast enough to be impressive even without the shooting scores. But speed didn't matter if she couldn't hit the final targets. Raven reached the shooting position and dropped us into stance without pause. No recovery period. No moment to steady her breathing. She just transitioned from sprint to shooting as if they were part of the same movement. 2 targets remained. 300 meters, the maximum distance for this qualification. Small targets made smaller by distance, requiring precision that became exponentially harder after physical exertion. First shot, target dropped. Center mass hit at 300 meters while breathing hard from a sprint with 40 pounds of gear. Second shot, target dropped. Perfect grouping. The digital scoreboard updated automatically. Final score, 48 targets out of 50 possible. Time, 8 minutes, 59 seconds. She had just broken the unit record by 4 targets and 23 seconds. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The silence on the range was absolute, broken only by the sound of Raven's weapon being placed on safe and the soft clink of her unloading the magazine. Edwin stared at his tablet screen, his face showing growing alarm as he reviewed whatever documents he had pulled up. Daniel remained motionless beside Hugo, but his eyes had narrowed with recognition that he hadn't yet voiced. Isaac walked slowly toward the scoreboard, checked the numbers personally, then checked them again. He pulled out his own tablet and accessed the battalion records system, verifying that Jasper's previous record of 42 targets in 9/22 was indeed the standing mark. Then he verified the current score again, 48 and 859. The system wasn't malfunctioning. The numbers were real. Kelvin stood frozen at his position, clipboard hanging forgotten in his hand. His professional pride as range NCOIC was built on understanding firearms and marksmanship. He could evaluate a shooter's skill within seconds of watching them fire. What he had just witnessed defied every category he used to classify capability. This wasn't regular Army marksmanship. This wasn't even special operations level shooting, at least not the kind he was familiar with. This was something else, something that suggested training environments he had only heard rumors about. The crowd had grown during the qualification. Soldiers from other companies had gathered when word spread that something unusual was happening. Now nearly 60 people stood watching, all of them trying to process what they had seen. The phones that had started recording as a joke were still recording, but now the footage showed something that would require explanation. Jasper's breathing had become audible. His chest rose and fell with rapid, shallow breaths. The humiliation burned through him like acid. Every soldier here knew his record. Many had tried to beat it. All had failed. It was his identity, his proof of superiority, the foundation of his status in the unit, and she had destroyed it, made it look easy, made him look ordinary by comparison. The rage building in his chest demanded outlet, demanded response, demanded that he do something to restore the natural order of things. "You cheated!" His voice came out loud enough to carry across the range. "There's no way you made those shots legitimately. This is nonsense." Raven finished unloading her weapon and turned to face him. She said nothing, which somehow made his accusation sound even more hollow. "I'm serious," Jasper continued, stepping toward her. "Either the scoring system malfunctioned or you somehow rigged the targets. Nobody shoots like that without training we would know about. Your records show administrative background. Where did you really train?" Still silence. Raven's expression remained neutral, showing neither anger nor satisfaction. She simply watched him with calm patience, waiting for him to finish. "Answer me!" Jasper's voice rose toward a shout. "Stop acting like you're something special when we all know you're—" "Lieutenant Quinn," Hugo's command voice cut through the rant like a blade. "That's enough." Jasper turned toward Hugo, his face flushed. "Sir, this doesn't add up. We need to investigate how this happened because—" "I said that's enough." Hugo's tone left no room for argument. He looked at Isaac. "First, Sergeant, verify the scoring system is functioning correctly." "Already did, sir. System is working perfectly. The score is legitimate." Hugo's expression showed controlled fury, though whether that fury was directed at Raven, at Jasper, or at the situation itself remained unclear. He turned to Edwin. "Captain North, pull Corporal Cross's complete service record, training history, previous assignments, everything." "Already on it, sir." Edwin's voice had gone quiet. "But, sir, you need to see this." "See what?" Edwin hesitated, his eyes still on the tablet screen. "Her transfer orders are standard, but when I pulled her full file, there's a classification restriction. Parts of her record are blocked. I don't have clearance to access them." The words landed like a grenade. Soldiers didn't have classified service records unless they had been involved in operations or units that required security clearances beyond normal levels. Administrative personnel didn't have classification restrictions. Logistics specialists didn't have blocked files. Daniel spoke for the first time, his voice careful and measured. "What level classification?" "The system just says restricted access, requires specialized clearance." Edwin looked up from the tablet. "Sir, I've been handling personnel files for 15 years. I've never seen a corporal's record with this kind of restriction." Isaac and Daniel exchanged a glance. Both of them had worked with specialized units during their careers. Both of them knew what classification restrictions usually meant, and both of them were starting to understand that Raven Cross represented something far more complicated than a new transfer who happened to shoot well. Hugo turned back to Raven, his expression hardening into something between suspicion and hostility. "Corporal, you will report to my office immediately following this exercise. You have questions to answer about your background and training. Until then, you're dismissed from the range." "Yes, sir." Raven slung her weapon, turned with precise military bearing, and walked toward the equipment shed to return her gear. As she moved away from the firing line, conversations exploded across the range. Soldiers who had been silent now spoke in urgent, confused voices. The betting pool had dissolved into arguments about what had just happened. Theories spread like wildfire: secret training program, mistaken identity, some kind of test conducted by higher headquarters. Nobody knew what to believe, but everyone knew they had just witnessed something that would change the dynamic of Alpha Company permanently. Speaking of military precision, let me tell you about something that's revolutionizing tactical communication. Advanced encrypted smartphones designed for high-security environments are now available for professional use. These devices feature military-grade encryption, satellite connectivity for remote operations, and biometric security that prevents unauthorized access. They're built to withstand extreme conditions, waterproof, shockproof, and capable of functioning in temperatures from -40 to +60 degrees Celsius. For professionals who need reliable communication in challenging environments, this technology represents a significant advancement in field operations and secure data transmission. Oliver stood motionless, his understanding of the military hierarchy experiencing fundamental disruption. He had believed that rank and reputation indicated capability, that the social order of the unit reflected actual skill levels. Watching someone he had dismissed as irrelevant destroy records held by people he admired forced him to question everything he thought he understood. The discomfort showed on his young face as competing ideas fought for dominance. Amber uncrossed her arms slowly, her conflicted expression shifting towards something that might have been cautious hope. She had survived in this unit by accepting limitations, by not challenging the assumptions others made about what women could do in combat roles. Watching Raven shatter those assumptions created complicated emotions: admiration mixed with fear of backlash, hope mixed with knowledge that one's success didn't change systemic attitudes, pride mixed with awareness that Raven's performance would now be used as a measuring stick against all women in the unit. Nothing about this moment was simple. Levi found himself smiling despite the tension in the air. For months, he had been the target of mockery for being too thin, too weak-looking, not physically impressive enough to meet the unspoken standards of infantry culture. Watching someone even smaller than him demonstrate absolute dominance in the most objective test available gave him a small measure of vindication. Maybe capability wasn't as simple as size and appearance. Maybe the assumptions he faced daily were as wrong as the assumptions they had all made about Raven. Cyrus turned and walked away from the range without speaking to anyone. His entire identity was built on physical intimidation, on being larger and stronger than everyone else. That identity depended on the equation that physical size equals capability. What he had just witnessed didn't fit that equation, and he had no framework for processing the contradiction. Better to leave, to avoid confronting the questions that were starting to form in his mind about whether his own value was as secure as he had always believed. Jasper remained at the firing line, staring at the scoreboard as if looking at it long enough might change the numbers. 8 years. He had held that record for 8 years, had been congratulated, respected, envied for 8 years, and now it was gone, taken by someone who shouldn't have been capable of this. The humiliation burned through him with intensity that made his hands shake. This couldn't stand. There had to be a way to fix this, to restore the proper order, to make people understand that this was an aberration, not a new standard. He just had to find it. The range began to clear as soldiers returned to other duties, but the conversations continued. Small groups formed to discuss what they had seen, to develop theories, to process the cognitive dissonance of watching assumptions crumble in real time. Ryan's phone footage would be shared within hours, spreading the story beyond Alpha Company to the entire installation. By evening, every soldier at Fort Bragg would know about the mysterious new corporal who had broken records that were supposed to be unbreakable. Isaac approached Hugo and Daniel, keeping his voice low. "Sir, with your permission, I'd like to be present when you interview Corporal Cross." Hugo nodded curtly. "Agreed. You noticed something earlier, before the qualification. What was it?" "Her stance, sir. The way she handles the weapon. Those are trained responses that go beyond basic infantry school. I couldn't place it at first, But after watching her shoot, Isaac paused, choosing his words carefully. Sir, I've worked with Rangers, Special Forces, even Delta Force during my time at Fort Benning. This corporal moves like someone from that world. The economy of motion, the muscle memory, the stress response control, that doesn't come from regular Army training. Daniel's expression confirmed something he had been thinking. I saw similar patterns when I worked as liaison with SEAL Team 3 back in 2017. The way she cleared that weapon malfunction was textbook SEAL procedure, exactly the way they teach it at their advanced weapons course. I watched their instructors run drills for months. I know what it looks like. Navy? Hugo's tone suggested he found this possibility absurd. She's wearing an Army uniform. Her transfer orders came from Army Personnel Command. Sir, inter-service transfers happen. Medical discharges happen. Specialized soldiers rejoin under different circumstances all the time. Daniel kept his voice carefully neutral. I'm not saying I know what her background is. I'm saying the classification restrictions on her file, combined with skills that match specialized training patterns, suggest we're not looking at a normal personnel situation. Hugo's jaw clenched. He prided himself on understanding the soldiers under his command, on being able to evaluate capability and assign personnel accordingly. The idea that someone had been in his battalion for a week without him recognizing their actual background represented a failure of leadership that cut deep. Worse, he had publicly dismissed her, had announced she wasn't qualified, had essentially called her inadequate in front of dozens of witnesses. And now it appeared he might have been completely wrong. We'll get answers, Hugo said flatly. One way or another, we'll find out exactly who Corporal Cross is and why her record has classification restrictions. Until then, this conversation stays between us. Understood? Both men nodded agreement. Raven had finished returning her equipment and now stood near the equipment shed, waiting. Her posture showed patience rather than nervousness, as if being investigated by battalion leadership was simply another part of the day. Isaac studied her from a distance, noting details that had escaped attention earlier. The way she stood put weight on her left leg more than her right, suggesting an old injury to the right side. The way her left hand occasionally touched her lower back in an unconscious gesture suggested chronic pain in that area. These were small things, barely visible, but they told stories about physical trauma that hadn't fully healed. A medical discharge made sense suddenly. Someone with those movement patterns had been seriously injured at some point. The question was where and how. The morning had stretched into late morning. The sun had burned away most of the fog, raising the temperature to something almost comfortable. Other training activities resumed on different parts of the range complex. The normal routine of military life continued around the disruption that Raven's performance had created. But, for Alpha Company, nothing felt normal anymore. A fault line had appeared in their understanding of their world, and nobody quite knew what would happen when the full earthquake hit. Hugo dismissed the formation, ordering everyone back to regular duties while he conducted his investigation. Soldiers dispersed reluctantly, most of them glancing back at Raven as they left, as if afraid she might disappear if they stopped watching. The story would dominate conversations for the rest of the day, growing and mutating as it spread. By evening, the exaggerations would begin. By tomorrow, the legend would be forming. Raven walked toward the battalion headquarters building, flanked by Isaac and Daniel, with Hugo leading the way. Edwin hurried to keep up, still clutching his tablet, still trying to access records that remained frustratingly blocked. The group moved in silence, each person processing the situation through their own lens of experience and responsibility. Inside the headquarters building, Hugo's office occupied a corner position that provided windows overlooking the parade ground. The space was functional rather than comfortable. Military-issue desk, filing cabinets, flags on stands, photographs of previous commanders on the walls. Hugo took his seat behind the desk, while Isaac and Daniel stood to either side. Edwin positioned himself near the door, tablet ready. Raven stood at attention in front of the desk, her expression neutral and patient. At ease, Corporal. Hugo's voice had lost some of its earlier anger, replaced by something harder to define. We need to have a very direct conversation about your background. Yes, sir. Your transfer orders indicate you came from Fort Lee. Administrative assignment, no combat experience, no specialized training. But what we just witnessed on that range contradicts every part of that profile. Hugo leaned forward slightly. So, I'll ask you plainly. Who are you, and what is your actual background? Raven met his eyes without flinching. I'm Corporal Raven Cross, sir. Recently transferred to Alpha Company as requested. My current assignment is Rifleman. That's not what I asked. Hugo's patience was wearing thin. Your service record has classification restrictions that require specialized clearance to access. Explain that. I'm not authorized to discuss classified aspects of my service history, sir. Those restrictions exist for operational security reasons. Daniel spoke up, his tone more conversational than interrogatory. Corporal, I spent time working with Navy SEAL teams. The way you handled that weapon malfunction was identical to techniques taught at their advanced weapons course. Care to comment on that? Something flickered in Raven's expression, too quick to identify clearly. I've received various training throughout my service, sir. I apply what I've learned. Various training from where? Hugo pressed. Give me specifics. What units have you served with? Sir, I can provide my complete unclassified service history, but portions of my record are restricted for reasons I cannot discuss without proper authorization. If you require access to classified portions, you'll need to submit a request through the appropriate security channels. It was a perfect bureaucratic deflection, technically correct and completely unhelpful. Isaac suppressed a slight smile. She was giving them exactly what regulations required and nothing more. That kind of awareness of how to navigate command structure came from experience dealing with sensitive situations. Edwin looked up from his tablet. Sir, I've submitted the access request, but it could take days or weeks to process. In the meantime, we have no way to verify anything about her background beyond what's in the unclassified file. Hugo stood abruptly, his frustration breaking through professional composure. This is unacceptable. I have a soldier in my battalion with capabilities that suggest specialized training, with a service record I cannot fully access, and I'm supposed to just accept that I can't know who she actually is? With respect, sir, Raven said quietly, you know exactly who I am right now. I'm a corporal assigned to your command. I successfully completed the required qualification. My current capabilities are what matter for unit readiness, not the specific path that led to those capabilities. The logic was sound, which only made Hugo more frustrated. He was being forced to accept uncertainty in a situation where he demanded answers. The military ran on understanding chain of command, on knowing the background and capabilities of every soldier under your authority. This classification restriction disrupted that fundamental structure. Daniel caught Isaac's eye and gave a subtle nod toward the door. They both recognized that this conversation wasn't going to produce the answers Hugo wanted, at least not immediately. Better to regroup, to approach the situation from different angles, to give time for emotions to cool and strategies to develop. Sir, Daniel said carefully, perhaps we should take some time to review what information we can access and develop a plan for proceeding. Corporal Cross isn't going anywhere. We can continue this conversation once we have better clarity on the administrative situation. Hugo clearly wanted to continue pushing, but he also recognized the wisdom in Daniel's suggestion. Interrogating a soldier who was within her rights to cite classification restrictions wouldn't produce useful results. Fine. Corporal Cross, you're dismissed. Return to your duties. But understand that this situation is not resolved. You will be required to provide additional information as soon as the access restrictions are addressed. Understood, sir. Raven saluted, executed a perfect about-face, and left the office. Isaac waited until the door closed before speaking. Sir, whatever her background is, she's clearly had extensive advanced training. The way she moved, the way she shot, the way she responded to stress, that's elite-level capability. We should consider that having someone with those skills in the battalion might be an asset rather than a problem. An asset I don't understand and can't properly utilize, Hugo countered. How am I supposed to deploy someone when I don't know what they're actually capable of? Or what limitations they might have from previous service? You just watched what she's capable of, sir, Daniel pointed out. She broke the battalion record by a significant margin. She demonstrated advanced tactical skills and weapon manipulation. Whatever she did before, she can clearly handle infantry operations at an exceptional level. Hugo sat back down, rubbing his temples. The morning had not gone the way he expected, and the day was only going to get more complicated from here. Get me those classified records. I don't care what channels you have to go through. I want to know who I actually have in my unit. The three officers spent the next hour reviewing what information they could access, which was frustratingly little. Raven's unclassified file showed a standard progression through basic training, some administrative assignments, and then the recent transfer to Fort Bragg. but there were gaps in the timeline that suggested periods of service not documented in the accessible records. Dates that didn't quite line up. Assignment locations that changed without clear transition orders. The signature of someone whose actual service history had been deliberately obscured. Meanwhile, throughout Alpha Company and spreading to the rest of the battalion, Raven's performance was becoming the dominant topic of conversation. The story evolved with each retelling, picking up embellishments and speculation. Some soldiers claimed she must have been Special Forces. Others suggested Delta Force, or maybe even something more classified than that. A few believed the whole thing was staged as some kind of training exercise or evaluation of unit culture. Jasper had retreated to the company supply room, where he sat alone amid boxes of equipment and inventory lists. The record book lay open on the table in front of him, showing his name beside the mark of 42 targets and 922. Someone would have to update that entry now, replace his name with hers, create a new standard that he hadn't achieved. The humiliation was physical, making his chest tight and his breathing shallow. 8 years of being the best, gone in under 9 minutes. He had to find a way to discredit her performance. There had to be an explanation that made sense, that preserved the proper order of things. Maybe she had cheated somehow. Maybe the scoring system had malfunctioned despite Isaac's verification. Maybe her background was problematic in ways that would disqualify her results. He needed to find something, anything, that would let him maintain his status and identity. His fingers drummed against the table as his mind worked through possibilities. The phone footage would spread throughout the base, which meant everyone would know what happened. But footage didn't tell the full story. It didn't show context or background. It didn't explain the suspicious classification restrictions or the gaps in her service record. Those details could be used to cast doubt, to suggest that things weren't as simple as they appeared. Jasper began developing a plan. Subtle at first, just questions raised in the right conversations. Then more direct, if subtle didn't work. He couldn't let this stand. His entire identity depended on being superior, on maintaining the hierarchy that gave his life structure and meaning. If he accepted that Raven was simply better than him, then everything else started to crumble too. Elsewhere in the company area, reactions varied wildly. Some soldiers were genuinely impressed and willing to adjust their assumptions. Others felt threatened by having their worldview challenged. A few recognized the complexity of the situation and tried to withhold judgment until more information became available. But everyone understood that Alpha Company had changed permanently. The comfortable certainty of knowing everyone's place in the hierarchy had been disrupted, and nothing would be quite the same again. We're at the tipping point now. Everything is about to explode, but before the big reveal, I want you to do something for me. Smash that like button if you're on the edge of your seat right now. Share this video with someone who needs to see what happens when people judge based on appearances. The next few minutes will be absolutely unforgettable. You've been warned. Don't say I didn't tell you to pay attention. The rest of the day proceeded with surface normality. Training schedules continued. Administrative duties were performed. Equipment was maintained. But underneath the routine, tensions built like pressure in a sealed container. Soldiers watched Raven with new intensity, analyzing her movements for additional clues about her background. Squad leaders struggled with how to integrate someone whose capabilities exceeded their own into normal team operations. Officers dealt with the bureaucratic complexity of trying to access classified records while maintaining operational continuity. Hugo spent hours on encrypted calls to higher headquarters, trying to expedite the clearance process for accessing Raven's full file. Each conversation provided frustratingly little information, mostly confirmation that, yes, classification restrictions existed, and yes, they were legitimate, and no, there was no way to bypass normal procedures just because he was curious. National security protocols didn't bend for inconvenience. By evening, when the company gathered for formation before release, the atmosphere was fundamentally different from the morning. Everyone knew what had happened at the range. The normal chatter and casual interaction had been replaced by watchful tension. Soldiers positioned themselves with awareness of where Raven stood, as if her presence created a gravitational field that bent the social space around it. Isaac called the formation to attention and began the normal evening announcements. Administrative details, next day's training schedule, reminders about maintenance responsibilities, everything standard and professional. But when he reached the end of the announcements, he added something not normally included. One more thing. This morning on the range, Corporal Cross set a new battalion record for marksmanship qualification. 48 out of 50 targets in 8 minutes, 59 seconds. This performance will be officially recognized in unit records. The acknowledgement made it real in a way that conversations couldn't. Isaac was formally confirming what everyone had heard, giving it official status that would become part of battalion history. Raven would be remembered for this, whether anyone liked it or not. Corporal Cross, Isaac continued, front and center. Raven moved through the formation with the same economical efficiency she showed in all her movements. She stopped in front of Isaac and came to attention. Outstanding performance today, Corporal. You've set a standard that will challenge soldiers in this battalion for years to come. Thank you, First Sergeant. Carry on. Raven returned to her position in formation. The acknowledgement had been brief and professional, but it served multiple purposes. It established that her performance was legitimate and recognized by leadership. It signaled that whatever questions existed about her background, her capabilities were not in doubt. And it began the process of integrating her exceptional performance into the unit's identity rather than treating it as an aberration to be explained away. When formation was dismissed, Raven returned to her barracks room. The space was small and Spartan, containing a bed, a wall locker, and a small desk. She had decorated nothing, personalized nothing, added no pictures or memorabilia that might provide insight into who she was before arriving here. The room looked temporary, as if its occupant might leave at any moment. She sat on the edge of the bed and allowed herself a moment of stillness. The day had been exactly what she expected. Hostility, dismissal, eventually surprise when she demonstrated capabilities that didn't match assumptions. This was the test she had designed for herself, the question she needed answered. Could she belong in this world? Could she find acceptance based on what she could do right now, rather than who she had been before? The answers were starting to emerge, and they were complicated. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. The message was brief. I see you're making friends. P. Raven stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Some connections to the past couldn't be severed completely, no matter how much distance you tried to create. But that was a problem for another day. Right now, she had to focus on the immediate challenge, convincing Alpha Company that she could be trusted, that she wasn't a threat to their structure or identity, that she could be a soldier among soldiers rather than a mystery to be solved. The classification restrictions on her file would be a problem. Hugo wasn't the type to let unanswered questions remain unanswered. Eventually, someone with proper clearance would review her full record and provide information to battalion leadership. When that happened, everything would shift again. People would look at her differently once they knew the specifics. She would become defined by what she had done rather than what she could do. But for now, she existed in this strange liminal space where assumptions had been broken, but truth hadn't yet been established. It was uncomfortable and uncertain, but it was also exactly what she needed. A chance to prove herself without the weight of reputation or expectation. A chance to answer the question, without the identity she had built over years of specialized service. Could she still find purpose and belonging? The answer mattered more than anyone watching her could possibly understand. Because if she couldn't belong here, in a regular unit doing regular work with people who had no reason to care about her past achievements, then maybe she didn't belong anywhere anymore. Maybe the person she had been was the only version of herself that could exist, and everything since had been an elaborate form of denial. She stood and began preparing her equipment for the next day's training. The motions were automatic, requiring no thought. Check weapon, clean it thoroughly, inspect for wear or damage, prepare magazines, arrange tactical gear for easy access. These tasks provided structure and purpose, temporary barriers against the larger questions that had no easy answers. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Jasper wasn't finished with his humiliation, which meant conflict was inevitable. Hugo would continue pushing for access to her records, which meant revelation was coming. The unit would continue adjusting to having someone with her capabilities among them, which meant relationships would remain complicated and unstable for the foreseeable future. But tonight, for just a few hours, she could exist in this narrow window between past and future, defined by neither, belonging to nothing except this present moment. It was a fragile piece, destined to shatter. But while it lasted, she would take what small comfort it offered. The sun set over Fort Bragg, casting long shadows across the training grounds, where tomorrow's challenges would begin again. The next morning arrived with clear skies and climbing temperatures. Hugo had scheduled a company-wide meeting for 0900 hours, mandatory attendance. The briefing room felt cramped with 80 soldiers packed inside. Raven sat near the back, positioned to maintain awareness of exits while minimizing visibility. Isaac stood beside Hugo at the front, expression unreadable. Hugo began with administrative announcements before addressing the real purpose. Yesterday's qualification exercise demonstrated exceptional performance that exceeded our unit standards. Corporal Cross achieved scores that surpass any previous record in this battalion. Jasper sat 3 rows from the front, jaw clenched tight. Cyrus beside him radiated hostility. The tension was palpable. "I've spent 18 hours attempting to access Corporal Cross's complete service record," Hugo continued. "Classification restrictions prevent immediate access to portions of her file. These restrictions are legitimate and properly authorized. Until clearance is granted, we operate based on available information." Low murmurs spread through the crowd. Edwin shifted uncomfortably near the door, his tablet held like a shield. Corporal Cross's demonstrated capabilities speak for themselves. She completed qualification at a level surpassing any previous performance. Those results are verified and will stand. Hugo's voice hardened. However, this situation revealed issues with how we evaluate personnel. Mockery of fellow soldiers, predetermined judgments, betting pools treating professional evaluation as entertainment. These actions fall below expected standards. Several soldiers found sudden interest in the floor. Every soldier in Alpha Company will be evaluated based on demonstrated performance, not assumptions about capability based on appearance or gender. Understood? "Yes, sir," echoed through the room with varying enthusiasm. The message was delivered. The institutional response validated Raven's performance while rebuking those who had prejudged her. It established official position, but wouldn't resolve underlying tensions. As soldiers filed out, Raven remained seated until most had cleared. When she stood, Jasper blocked her path. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "About what, Lieutenant?" "About how you actually achieved those scores. About who you really are." His eyes showed intensity born from hours of obsessive theorizing. "I've been in this unit 6 years. What you did wasn't normal. The colonel explained my performance was verified and legitimate. He doesn't have access to your full record. Nobody does. That's convenient." Jasper moved closer, using height for intimidation. "Something about you doesn't add up. Your belief isn't required, Lieutenant. My results stand regardless." The dismissal intensified his frustration. "This isn't over. Everyone has secrets. I'm going to find yours." "Are you threatening a fellow soldier, sir?" The question hung between them, implications clear. Continuing this approach could trigger harassment investigation, revealing his sabotage role. His anger had led him towards serious mistake. He backed away slightly, expression shifting to calculated coldness. "I'm stating facts, Corporal. Truth always surfaces. When it does, we'll see if you're still confident." He left without waiting for response. The week established new patterns. Training continued with Raven participating in all activities. Her consistent excellence gradually shifted from shocking to expected. Though acceptance didn't translate to friendship, Oliver had started seeking her out, asking questions about technique. His admiration was transparent but genuine. Levi became an unofficial ally, defending her when conversations turned critical. Amber remained conflicted, but had started acknowledging Raven with nods and brief exchanges. Cyrus avoided direct interaction, his hostility obvious in body language. Kelvin became coldly professional, treating Raven with technical correctness but zero warmth. On Friday, 5 days post-qualification, Hugo received notification his clearance request was approved. He would access Raven's complete file Monday morning through secure terminal at Battalion Intelligence Office. Whatever secrets her background contained would be revealed within 72 hours. Friday afternoon brought tactical movement exercises requiring teams to navigate obstacle courses while maintaining combat readiness. Jasper positioned himself as evaluator, giving him authority to critique and assign scores. When Raven's team approached the final obstacle, a 12-foot wall, he saw opportunity. "Cross, you're up first." The wall was designed to challenge smaller soldiers. Raven studied it briefly, backed up, ran forward with controlled speed, and hit the wall with practiced foot placement. Her hands caught the top edge and she pulled herself over efficiently. Jasper's expression darkened. Again, solo, no running start. It was unusual demand, not standard protocol. Several soldiers exchanged glances. This wasn't assessment anymore. Raven dropped back, approached directly, jumped to catch a protrusion 7 feet up, used it as temporary foothold, reached the top, and pulled herself up within 10 seconds. Time penalties for inefficient technique, Jasper announced. Isaac walked over with measured deliberation. Lieutenant Quinn, what specific inefficiency? Multiple attempts to mount obstacle, First Sergeant. She made one attempt with running start, authorized technique. Then you ordered second attempt with different parameters. That's not standard protocol. Isaac's voice remained professional. Either evaluate according to standard or explain deviation. Jasper faced a choice: back down and lose face, or push forward and risk Isaac questioning his judgment. Both options were bad. Noted, First Sergeant. Standard evaluation stands. But the pattern was established. Jasper was actively creating problems, manufacturing situations where Raven might struggle. The weekend passed with relative calm. Monday morning arrived with weight of pending revelation. Hugo entered the intelligence office at 0800 hours, accompanied by Isaac and Daniel. The secure terminal sat in a windowless room designed to prevent surveillance. After verification, Hugo accessed Raven's complete file. As classified sections appeared, his expression changed from curiosity to shock to disbelief. "Holy cow," he said quietly. Isaac and Daniel moved closer to read. The file detailed service history that explained everything while complicating everything. Raven Cross had enlisted in the Navy at 18. Basic training, then specialized selection for Special Warfare Combatant Craft Crewman Program, SWCC. That program supported SEAL operations through specialized boat teams. Training had failure rates exceeding 80%. She had completed it, then spent 4 years assigned to SEAL Team 3, supporting direct action missions in Iraq and Afghanistan. Operations listed: Ramadi, Fallujah, Kandahar Province, Helmand. Dozens of combat missions as boat crew and occasional ground support. Call sign: Ghost, for her ability to navigate waterways at night without detection, bringing SEAL elements into target areas with impossible precision. August 12, 2019. During extraction in Kunar Province, her boat was hit by IED hidden along riverbank. Explosion killed 2 SEAL members, severely injured 3 others, including Raven. Fractured spine in 3 places, internal injuries, should have died from blood loss. Instead, she continued operating the boat 17 more minutes, completing extraction while wounded, getting survivors to extraction point where helicopters waited. She passed out from blood loss after confirming everyone was aboard. Navy Achievement Medal with V device for Valor came from that action, along with Purple Heart and Combat Action Ribbon. 18 months recovery followed, multiple surgeries, physical therapy. Medical board determined she couldn't return to SWCC duties due to permanent spinal damage. Medical discharge with full honors, February 2021. Gap in timeline followed. 2 years struggling with civilian adjustment, chronic pain, loss of identity. Psychological evaluation noted depression and isolation risk factors. January 2024. She applied for Army enlistment. Special channels due to medical history, requiring multiple reviews and waivers. Accepted with corporal rank based on prior service, but physical limitations restricted her to non-combat specialties. Assignment to Fort Bragg was her request. Family proximity cited as primary reason. Transfer to Alpha Company as rifleman was unauthorized by medical profile. Personnel error assigned her to infantry when restrictions specified administrative roles only. That error placed her in exact situation she apparently wanted. Chance to prove she could still perform combat duties despite medical discharge. Hugo leaned back, processing information. She chose this, chose to face it, knowing what reception she'd get. Testing herself, Isaac said quietly, seeing if she still belongs after everything that happened. Daniel nodded. Classification restrictions make sense now. Her operations with SEAL Team 3 involved sensitive targets and methods. Navy keeps those locked for operational security. Isaac pulled up medical reports detailing her current condition. Permanent spinal damage requiring ongoing pain management. Physical restrictions on loads above 40 pounds for extended periods. Recommended limitations on high-impact activities. That she completed qualification with 40-pound load, despite restrictions, said everything about pain tolerance and determination. She shouldn't have been able to do what we saw, Hugo said, reading medical details. According to these restrictions, sustained activity at that level should be beyond capability. People exceed medical predictions when motivation is high enough, Daniel replied. She's probably paying for it with increased inflammation, but she chose that trade-off. Silence followed as 3 men processed implications. The dismissed rookie was decorated combat veteran who saved lives while critically wounded. Classification restrictions weren't hiding something nefarious. They protected operational details and gave her fresh start. Unauthorized infantry assignment was administrative error that accidentally gave her exactly what she wanted, real test of whether she could still belong. This changes things, Hugo said finally. We can't let her continue an infantry role given medical restrictions. It's liability issue. With respect, sir, Isaac countered, she's demonstrated she can perform those duties at higher level than most soldiers without restrictions. Forcing her into administrative work seems counterproductive. It's about regulations and liability, First Sergeant. Medical profiles exist for good reasons. Daniel raised a hand. Middle path exists. We could request re-evaluation of medical restrictions based on demonstrated performance. Get current assessments, see if profile can be updated to reflect actual capabilities rather than theoretical limitations from 3 years ago. That approach had merit. Medical profiles could be adjusted based on new evidence. It offered way forward respecting both regulations and reality. We'll pursue that, Hugo decided. Meanwhile, she continues current role with modified restrictions aligning with profile. No extended ruck marches, no heavy loads beyond 40 pounds, no excessive spine strain. Compromise satisfied nobody completely, which usually meant reasonably fair. Meeting concluded with plans to inform Raven. She deserved to know her background was no longer secret to battalion leadership. When it comes to protecting what matters most, specialized insurance for military veterans and active duty personnel is essential. Comprehensive coverage programs designed specifically for service members offer unique benefits, including disability protection, life insurance with combat zone coverage, and investment portfolios tailored to military career transitions. These financial services understand the specific challenges faced by those who serve, offering flexible payment options during deployment, and specialized advisors who understand military benefits and retirement planning. It's about securing your future and your family's future, regardless of where your service takes you. That afternoon, Alpha Company conducted final readiness exercise, timed 200-meter sprint with full combat load, followed by immediate precision target engagement, simulating combat stress and fatigue. Raven prepared equipment carefully, loading exactly 40 pounds despite knowing it was her maximum limit. Old injury throbbed with dull persistence, constant reminder of Kunar province. Jasper appeared as exercise began. Cross, you're first up. Timing wasn't coincidental. After full training day, this would push her limits hard. If she failed, it provided ammunition to question her presence. Raven moved to starting line and waited for command. She ran with controlled pace, managing energy rather than sprinting. Weight pulled at shoulders and back, each step sending pain jolts through damaged spine. But pain was familiar, manageable, just information. She completed sprint in 3 minutes 12 seconds, faster than Jasper's recorded 3:28. Target engagement followed immediately. 5 targets at 300 meters, requiring absolute precision while breathing hard. First shot, target dropped. Second shot, target dropped. Pattern continued with mechanical precision. But on 4th shot, adjusting for wind, something in her back shifted. Pain spiked from background to overwhelming, sharp enough to blur vision momentarily. Breathing hitched. Jasper noticed. Problem, Corporal? No, sir. 5th shot. She forced breathing back to control, centered stance despite screaming protest. Squeezed trigger. Target dropped. Perfect score. But cost showed in careful movement afterward. In grimace she couldn't hide. Jasper moved closer, voice loud enough to carry. You know, Cross, I've been thinking about your performance. The record-breaking scores, advanced techniques. It seems too good to be true. Raven unloaded weapon, keeping movement slow despite wanting to collapse. Scores were verified, Lieutenant. This has been addressed. Verified, sure, but verification doesn't explain where you learn those skills. Doesn't explain classified record portions. Doesn't explain why someone with administrative background shoots like special operations. His voice carried challenge and satisfaction. I think you're hiding something problematic, and I'm going to keep pushing until truth comes out. Lieutenant Quinn, Isaac's voice cut through tension. A word. Now. Jasper had no choice. He followed Isaac away to speak privately. Daniel had appeared as well, timing suggesting he'd been informed and came to intervene. Minutes later, Jasper returned, professional composure cracked enough to show underlying anger. Being pulled away felt like being denied justice. "This isn't over," he said directly to Raven, voice low but intense. "Everyone's going to know exactly who you are and why you don't belong here." He reached out to grab her shoulder, gesture meant to physically emphasize his point. Raven shifted away reflexively, but Jasper's hand caught her uniform jacket anyway, fingers tangling in fabric. He pulled, not hard but enough to make her stumble. The jacket tore. Sound was sharp and distinct, fabric giving way under stress. Tear ran along shoulder seam, opening gap that exposed skin underneath. And on that skin, clearly visible to everyone watching, was a tattoo. Design was unmistakable, Navy SEAL Trident, iconic symbol of elite maritime special operations. Below it, Spec War. Below that, dates, 2015 to 2019. 3 seconds of absolute silence. Then Isaac stood to attention so fast it looked like someone pulled him with wire. Eyes went wide, fixed on tattoo, with recognition bordering shock. "Holy cow," he breathed. "BUD-S?" The acronym hung in air. Basic Underwater Demolition, SEAL Training. Program forging Navy SEALs through 6 months of suffering breaking most candidates. Tattoo indicated completion of one of the hardest military training programs existing. Jasper's hand dropped. He stumbled backward, face draining color. "No," he said, word coming strangled. "No way, that's not—" "You can't be." Hugo had arrived in time to witness reveal. He stood frozen, expression cycling through disbelief, understanding, horror at how badly he'd misjudged. Cyrus's massive frame went rigid, arms falling to sides. Mouth opened and closed without sound, world view crashing down. Kelvin dropped clipboard. Clatter seemed impossibly loud. Face showed naked shock. Professional assessment revealed as completely wrong. Oliver's phone was out recording, but hands shook badly. Young face showed expression of someone watching reality fundamentally restructure. Amber's hand covered mouth, tears forming. Not sadness, but recognition of judgment cost and surviving, in world expecting you to be less. Ethan backed away slowly, shame flooding features as he remembered betting pool, mockery, casual cruelty. Silence broke like dam bursting. Voices exploded across training area, soldiers exclaiming and questioning, trying to process impossibility. Phones came out as everyone tried to document the moment. Daniel moved forward, voice cutting chaos with command authority. "Everyone quiet, now!" Noise subsided to whispers, then silence. Daniel's expression showed complicated emotions. Recognition, but also awareness this moment would have profound consequences. Isaac pulled out tablet with shaking hands, accessing personnel systems with override codes reaching beyond normal restrictions. Face went pale as he read, then looked up at Raven with something approaching awe. "Corporal Raven Cross," Isaac said formally, but shaken. "Former Navy Special Warfare Combatant Craft Crewman, SWCC. Assigned SEAL Team 3 Support Operations 2015 to 2019. Words landed like artillery. SWCC wasn't publicly known as SEALs, but military personnel understood. Boat teams bringing SEAL elements into hostile territory, providing combat support, executing extractions under fire. Brutal selection process, operations breaking most people. 4 years combat deployments. Iraq and Afghanistan, Operations Ramadi, Fallujah, Kandahar Province, Helmand. He paused, swallowing hard. Call sign, Ghost. Nickname sent chills through crowd. In special operations, call signs weren't given lightly. Ghost suggested stealth, precision, ability to move unseen. Someone who earned serious respect from communities not granting respect easily. Expert marksman qualification, combat action ribbon, Navy Achievement Medal with VA device. V device stopped the conversations. That V meant Valor, awarded for heroism in combat, not for doing job well, for actions beyond duty, beyond expectation, into extraordinary courage realm. Medical discharge August 2019. IED incident, Kunar Province, fractured spine, 18 months recovery. Medical discharge explained why someone with her background was Army corporal instead of still serving with SEAL teams. She hadn't left by choice, forced out by combat injuries. Jasper looked like he might be sick. Realization of what he'd done, mocking decorated combat veteran, sabotaging equipment, publicly humiliating someone who had earned respect he'd never achieve, was visibly destroying him. Hugo's bearing kept him upright, but expression showed man confronting worst judgment failure in career. He had dismissed her as inadequate, publicly stated she didn't belong, created environment treating her with contempt. And she was veteran whose record made his 30 years look ordinary. Cyrus slowly sank to ground, massive frame collapsing. Every assumption about strength, capability, who deserved respect revealed as false. He'd thought size and intimidation made him powerful. She'd saved lives while critically wounded. No comparison existed. Crowd had grown to nearly entire company, soldiers from other units appearing as word spread. Everyone watched, witnessing moment when hidden identity became revealed truth, when dismissed, rookie became recognized elite veteran. Raven stood in center, torn jacket hanging off shoulder, SEAL Trident visible to everyone, expression showing nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, no anger, just tired acceptance of secret exposed earlier than intended. Daniel stepped forward, came to attention, and saluted. Gesture was formal and precise. Senior officer showing respect to enlisted soldier based on service and sacrifice rather than rank. Recognition of something deeper than military hierarchy. Warrior acknowledging warrior. Isaac followed, own salute equally formal. Other soldiers began standing to attention, creating ripple effect as people responded with only gesture feeling adequate. Raven returned salutes with quiet dignity, then spoke, voice calm and measured, carrying clearly. I didn't come here to hide who I was. I came to find out if I could still belong somewhere, after losing the only identity I ever had. Medical discharge took away my team, my purpose, my place. I needed to know if I could build something new without reputation I used to have. She glanced at torn jacket, exposed tattoo, back to crowd. I chose Alpha Company because you didn't know me. I chose infantry because it's hardest environment for someone like me to be accepted. I needed to prove my value wasn't just about what I used to do. It was about what I could still contribute right now. Honesty cut through remaining skepticism. This wasn't someone trying to impress or trade on past glory. This was someone rebuilding identity after trauma, testing whether she still had value in a world that moved on without her. Hugo found his voice, rougher than normal. Corporal Cross, I owe you apology. I made judgments based on assumptions rather than evidence. I created an environment where you were treated with disrespect you never deserved. That leadership failure is entirely mine. Thank you, sir. Major Charlotte Hayes appeared, having been summoned when a situation erupted. As Battalion XO, she represented official institutional response. She took in scene quickly, torn uniform, visible tattoo, soldiers at attention surrounding one corporal, and understood something significant had occurred. First Sergeant, report. Isaac provided concise summary. Charlotte listened without interruption, nodded once, turned to Raven. Corporal Cross, your service record is now formal attention matter. Battalion leadership will discuss appropriate assignment given background and medical status. Meanwhile, you're released from duty remainder of day. Report my office tomorrow, 0900 hours. Yes, ma'am. Charlotte's gaze swept assembled company. Everyone else, return to duty stations. This will be addressed through proper channels. I don't want rumors running wild. Facts are clear enough without embellishment. Crowd dispersed reluctantly, still talking urgently, but tone had changed completely. Mockery was gone, replaced by respect, awe, and in some cases shame at how they'd treated her before knowing truth. Jasper remained frozen until Isaac approached directly. Lieutenant Quinn, come with me, now. Words carried weight beyond instruction. Jasper was about to face formal consequences, and everyone knew it. He followed like man walking to execution. For veterans transitioning to civilian careers or seeking advancement, specialized online education programs offer crucial support. Accredited courses in leadership development, technical skills certification, and professional advancement are specifically designed around military schedules and experience. These programs recognize military training as course credit, offer accelerated degree completion, and provide career counseling from advisors who understand veteran employment challenges. Whether pursuing a bachelor's degree, professional certification, or specialized technical training, these education platforms help translate military experience into civilian credentials that employers value. Investment in education is investment in your future beyond service. Evening brought formal consequences. Sergeant Major Abel Stone convened immediate investigation into Jasper's conduct. Kelvin was placed on administrative leave. Cyrus received official reprimand for creating hostile environment. Hugo spent hours explaining situation to higher command, receiving guidance. Consensus was clear. Raven's medical profile needed immediate reevaluation, duty assignment needed formal review, battalion needed comprehensive training on appropriate conduct. By Tuesday morning, entire base knew. Ryan's phone footage had spread through unofficial channels, carrying SEAL Trident image and stunned reactions across Fort Bragg and beyond. Raven had become briefly famous the way military stories spread, through word of mouth, turning into legend faster than facts could keep up. When Raven reported to Charlotte's office at 0900 hours, she found not just Major, but also Hugo, Isaac, Daniel, and Command Sergeant Major James Hunt, brigade-level senior enlisted representing final authority on discipline matters. James spoke first, voice carrying 30 years uniform weight and combat experience giving few others perspective. Corporal Cross, I've reviewed your complete service record. I've reviewed events of past 2 weeks. Before discussing future assignment, I want to say clearly, what happened to you here was unacceptable. Harassment, mockery, sabotage, none should ever happen to any soldier, much less one with your background. Thank you, Sergeant Major. Now, we have practical matters. Your current medical profile doesn't authorize infantry duty. You're also here on administrative error. Personnel assigned you to, role your restrictions prohibit. We need to correct that. Raven's expression showed careful neutrality, but hands tightened slightly. Charlotte leaned forward. However, your demonstrated performance suggests medical limitations may need reevaluation. We're scheduling comprehensive assessment at Womack Army Medical Center. If doctors determine condition improved enough for modified combat duties, we can adjust profile. And if they don't, Raven asked quietly, then we find role utilizing your considerable skills while respecting physical limitations, Charlotte replied. You have expertise in training, tactics, operational planning, benefiting battalion regardless of direct infantry work. Isaac added, I've submitted requests to create combat instructor position specifically for advanced marksmanship and tactical movement. If approved, it allows you to train soldiers across battalion while working within whatever medical restrictions are confirmed. Proposal offered middle path between forcing purely administrative work and pretending limitations didn't exist. It would let her contribute meaningfully while acknowledging condition reality. Hugo spoke next, voice showing genuine remorse. Corporal Cross, I handled this badly from beginning. I made assumptions based on appearance rather than understanding who you were. I created an environment where others felt empowered to treat you with disrespect. I failed you as commander, and I'm sorry. Apology was more complete than earlier public statement, carrying weight of someone genuinely examining mistakes. Raven nodded acknowledgement. I'd like to make one thing right, Hugo continued. When medical reevaluation is complete, and assuming you're cleared for appropriate duties, I want to formally recognize current performance by awarding Expert Infantry Badge. Your scores exceed standard by significant margins. You've earned recognition. Expert Infantry Badge was coveted award in Army infantry units, indicating proven proficiency in weapons, tactics, combat skills. Offering it represented both recognition and integration into community she'd been trying to join. I'd be honored, sir. James stood. Corporal, you've proven something important. Not just to this unit, but everyone watching. You've shown capability and courage don't fit simple categories. That respect should be earned through performance, not assumed based on background. I hope you'll consider staying, helping us become better organization. I will, Sergeant Major. Following week brought rapid changes. Jasper was relieved of XO duties, reassigned to division headquarters staff. Lateral move looking professional, but everyone understood as punishment. He left without ceremony, 8-year tenure ending in disgrace. Kelvin suspended from range duties 90 days, required ethics training before future NCOIC consideration. Cyrus formally reprimanded, moved to different squad, influence permanently diminished. Positive developments came quickly. Oliver requested Raven as mentor, approved. Levi recognized by Isaac for integrity in defending her when socially costly. Amber selected for leadership development program preparing for eventual sergeant promotion. Battalion implemented mandatory training on appropriate conduct, respect, bias recognition. Training used Raven's situation as case study, with permission, demonstrating how assumptions could lead to mistreating capable soldiers. Most significantly, Raven's medical reevaluation determined while spinal damage was permanent, adaptation and compensatory strengthening exceeded original prognosis. Medical profile updated to allow modified combat duties with specific restrictions on sustained heavy loads and high-impact activities. Change meant she could legally continue infantry role while managing condition. 3 weeks post-revelation, Alpha Company held formation ceremony on parade ground. Entire battalion attended as witnesses. Hugo stood at attention in dress uniform, flanked by James and Charlotte. Raven stood before them in dress uniform, expert infantry badge displayed prominently. Hugo's voice carried across formation, reading official recognition. For demonstrated excellence in marksmanship, tactical proficiency, and combat skills, Corporal Raven Cross is hereby awarded Expert Infantry Badge, with honors for exceptional performance. He personally pinned badge onto her uniform, gesture formal and precise. Then he did something not part of standard ceremony, came to attention and saluted her. Not required by protocol, but recognition of service and sacrifice transcending rank. Formation erupted in applause, soldiers showing genuine appreciation for what she'd accomplished and how she'd handled situation with dignity despite mistreatment. When ceremony concluded, Daniel approached with careful formality. Corporal, I served with SEAL Team 3 back in 2017 as liaison. I heard stories about operator callsign Ghost. They said there was SWCC operator who saved entire SEAL element during bad extraction. Nobody talked specifics because operation was classified. Raven met his eyes. Operations remain classified, sir. Understood. But those SEALs talked about Ghost with respect bordering reverence. They said you navigated through enemy fire while critically wounded, completed extraction when 3 other boats were destroyed, refused medical treatment until everyone else was secure. They said you were toughest operator they'd ever worked with. They were good men, sir. They deserved to get home. Simplicity of response said everything about how she viewed her actions. She hadn't been trying to be heroic, just doing what needed to be done for people depending on her. That was intense, wasn't it? But here's the thing. This story isn't over. Raven's past is deeper than what we just uncovered, and there are questions that still need answers. If you want to see what happens next, if you want to know about that mysterious phone call at the end, you need to click the next video in this series. It's linked in the description and in the end screen. Don't miss it. The story continues, and it gets even bigger. That evening, Raven sat alone in barracks room, expert infantry badge resting on desk beside photographs she kept hidden in wall locker. Photo showed boat crew, 5 people in combat gear, weapons ready, faces painted for night operations. Young and confident, ready for whatever came next. 2 died in Kunar province. Other 2 moved to other assignments after her discharge. She was only one left in that frozen moment of camaraderie and purpose. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number, area code 757, Virginia Beach, Naval Special Warfare Command, home. She stared at screen before answering. Cross. Voice was male, rough, with decades of tobacco and combat stress. Ghost. It's Poseidon. Raven's hand tightened on phone. Poseidon was SEAL Team commander she'd worked with during last year with Team 3. Legend in special operations, someone whose judgment and experience were trusted absolutely. I'm out, Poseidon. Medical discharge. You know that. I know, but I have problem needing someone with your specific skills and knowledge. Team that pulled you from Kunar province, you remember them? How could she forget? They'd saved her life, stayed with her during 18 months recovery, treated her like family, even after she could no longer serve beside them. I remember. They're missing. Went dark 48 hours ago during operation in same area where you were hit. Lost all communication. We need someone who knows that terrain, understands how they operate, can think like they do. We need you. Raven looked at expert infantry badge on desk, then at photograph of old crew, then out window toward parade ground, where she'd just been formally recognized as part of new team, new purpose. I have medical profile now, restrictions on physical capability. I know your file better than you do, Ghost. I also know you just broke marksmanship record and proved you can still operate at levels most soldiers never reach. Question isn't whether you can do this physically. Question is whether you want to. whether you were ready to go back to that world, even temporarily. Silence stretched between them, weighted with implications. Going back meant facing demons she'd been running from. It meant risking fragile new identity she was building. It meant possibly getting hurt again, or worse. But it also meant being who she actually was, using skills nobody else possessed, saving people who saved her when she needed it most. "Send me the coordinates," she said finally, voice steady and certain. "Knew I could count on you, Ghost. Operational brief transmits in 10 minutes. This is Blackside, completely off book. Nobody knows you're coming, except me and one other providing local support. You good?" "I'm good." "Then welcome back to fight. We'll see you other side." Call ended. Raven sat in silence 3 full minutes, processing what she'd agreed to. Then she stood and began pulling equipment from wall locker. Not standard Army gear, but items kept from Navy days. Specialized tools and clothing designed for operations officially never happening. Phone buzzed with encrypted message containing coordinates, satellite imagery, tactical overview. She studied information with practiced eyes, recognizing terrain from memory. Operation area was 20 kilometers from where she'd been hit. Missing team operated along same river system she used to navigate in darkness. She knew that terrain better than anyone alive. Knew river patterns, hidden channels, locations where enemy typically positioned. If anyone could find missing team and bring them home, it was her. But success meant leaving fragile peace just established. It meant going back to being Ghost, instead of building new identity as Raven Cross, Army Summer Infantry Corporal. It meant choosing between person she was trying to become and person she'd always been. Decision wasn't really choice. Team that saved her life was in danger. Nothing else mattered compared to that. She finished packing gear into civilian backpack, not drawing attention. She would leave in 4 hours, catching military transport Poseidon arranged through classified channels. By dawn, she'd be back in Afghanistan, moving through hostile territory toward objective officially not existing. Before leaving, she wrote brief note to Isaac explaining family emergency, would return as soon as possible. Not exactly lie, SEAL team connections were closest thing to family anymore. He'd probably figure out truth eventually, but by then she'd either be back with missing team, or it wouldn't matter. She looked one final time at expert infantry badge on desk, symbol of new life she'd been trying to build. Then she picked it up and put it in pocket. Maybe when this was over, she could actually become person that badge represented, someone who belonged somewhere, someone with purpose beyond combat and survival. But first, she had to bring her people home. Night closed around Fort Bragg as Raven Cross walked away from barracks, carrying everything needed in one backpack, heading toward fight testing, whether she could still be Ghost one more time. Story starting with dismissal and contempt had evolved into recognition and respect. Now it evolved again, into something more dangerous and uncertain. Mysteries remained. Would she find missing team alive? Could damaged body withstand another combat operation? Would she make it back to Fort Bragg to continue building new identity? And what would happen if 2 versions of herself, Ghost and Raven, could no longer coexist in same person? Those questions would be answered in darkness and danger, in places where official records never reached, by a woman who'd proven she was stronger than anyone assumed but still didn't know if that strength was enough. Base lights faded behind her as she moved toward transport carrying her back to war, forward toward past, into unknown, exactly where she'd always belonged.